But the other thing the threat actor would look out for as well is if for that URL, if it's loaded into a open source threat intel source, right? So if they place that URL in virus total, they may receive an alert or alarm that says, okay, you've been detected, let's shut down this site. And that, in the end can conclude the activity, and we can't get down to the very bottom of what they're trying to get to. But through a number of our investigations that we've done on our incident response team, a lot of it has ended with being a business email compromise situation, because the threat actor is usually trying to use credential harvesting and loading those websites, because they can even then get a one-time password, not have to use that MFA token and still be able to log in. So they want to take good advantage of the user, what they're seeing, and get an idea of their day-to-day, and ConcealBrowse definitely helps us to be able to identify that activity.
Very interesting. Yeah, phishing. So my background really quick, I spent 7 years at a phishing simulation detection response company before joining Conceal. And part of the reason I joined that company was it was 2015. The stat of 91% of all breaches start with a phish, right? Targeting a human. It's like fast forward to 2024, and I think that stat within 1 or 2% is still true to this day. So the next topic I wanted to talk about is from all y'all's perspectives, what are some of the different solutions or tools that customers are using to try to, I guess, change behavior in humans? And from your lens, do you think that's working? Are there still some gaps there, or what can people do to really shore that up? And it's a free-for-all. Whoever wants to go first.
I think some of the first... go ahead, Scott. I'll let you have it.
So if there's been one constant over the last 20 years that I've seen, is that people will click on dumb things. It is, in fact, I used to make the joke for a number of years that if people ever quit clicking on dumb things, many of us would be out of work. And training is so critical, because I used to also make the analogy that hacking machines is relatively difficult. Hacking humans is relatively easy. And by having a comprehensive training program, you're helping stem that tide. You can't judge the success or failure of a training program, or this preventative measures program, by the onesies, twosies that are clicking on links, or failure to identify phishing activity, things like that in emails, or even just on their personal devices in their own personal lives. It's because without it, this problem would be much more pervasive. And Shante, I'm sure you'd have an additional bit of a take on that.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was going to bounce off of that as well, because, going back to humans protecting themselves, as much as you train someone, right, the way we react is different every time. But when you train a computer to do something, it does it the way you said it every time. And that is why we push forward a lot of times policy-based remediations, right? What are some policies? What are some tools or rules that can be put in place in the customer's environment to prevent that from happening again? That means that let's plan on that user clicking on that link. What are we going to do to stop it? Because it's inevitable. It's going to happen. And that's another reason why, once they click it, it opens in their browser. There's multiple mitigations there, right? Say if we have there's an email filtering platform installed in their email, right? If it didn't detect it, then we have the next other step that comes in, which is Conceal. We can see it load into the browser. We can look at that activity, and then again have another threat intel source from Conceal to see, is this normal activity or suspicious activity, right? But even if it isn't, we can still capture that and see what actually happened. So it's another piece to help us get a much bigger picture, because a SOC works best when they can see what happened, right? That's the ultimate goal. See what happened. We're not all about, stopping the activity. We want to stop it from ever happening again. And that's why it's important to put together those policy-based controls, because we should expect those threats to come up, and we should plan for how to stop it before it happens. Yeah.
Love that. I love to see what happens. That's a good segue, and we get to the actual demo. Craig, any thoughts from your perspective?
Well, just that I think both Scott and Shante made great points. At the end of the day, humans are going to be human, and I think about a product like Conceal. We're really trying to augment that human perception, so we can train the human. But at the end of the day, the stakes are very high, and it's a game where the attacker just has to score one goal and they win. And so it's getting harder and harder with AI, with just the sheer activity of domain registrations, for example, for people to really be able to use the traditional methods of hovering over links and looking at who sent them these things to keep up with that. And so instrumenting and giving another tool to the user so that they can make a better decision. And in our product, we allow the user to continue to view a site, but only in an isolation mode, which air gaps and protects them. But also, I think Shante brought up a really excellent point about the mission of the SOC, and that's just resonated with me in terms of giving the full picture of what's happening, not just within the browser, but the end-to-end attack chain. And that's where I think this integration with SentinelOne really can add a lot of value for the SOC, because SentinelOne has much broader visibility than we do. They see everything happening on that endpoint. We help complete the picture of what's going on inside the browser, and together that really adds up so that that SOC analyst, that whoever is working with that, really has a complete view of what happened, and then has a set of tools to remediate that.
Love it. Great. Well, I don't know about you. I mean, happy to take another discussion point, but maybe now is a good time to actually show the Better Together demo. Would that work for everybody?
Yeah, that would work great.
Sounds good.
So I will just go ahead and share my screen here. And let's see. All right. Can everybody see that okay?
You're good.
Yes.
All right. So one of the things that I love about the Conceal interface right here is that it is incredibly easy to use. All of your information, when it comes to incidents or trending or keeping track of whatever type of potentially malicious activity that's going on in your environment, it needs to be easily readable. From here, you can go ahead and see that we've got the browser extension that has either blocked or isolated some activity, which I went ahead and set up for yesterday. And with the SentinelOne integration, this data can be piped right directly into our Singularity data lake. So what I've done is taken this same alert data that we've got over here in Conceal, piped it directly into SentinelOne using syslog, and from here I can create simple dashboards from that I can just simply look at a glance in the same view or the same console that I'm looking at any of my other EDR data. So again, this is tying into that same story of being able to look at this stuff rapidly and being able to take action on it. And why this is useful is that human beings are generally the worst source of information in the event of an incident, because the very first question that is always asked is, what happened? And the first answer you get is, I didn't do that. Okay, so having a detailed best-of-breed EDR is extremely critical in working that out. So I can jump directly into our Singularity data lake, and I can start drilling down into the actual activity from that particular endpoint to see the who, what, when, where, and how that possibly generated this type of alert, and work out if this has even been contained or if it's not been contained. If this is if there's a concern that maybe this user could even be a victim of credential harvesting, then or if someone is at the risk of having even lateral movement, I can even go directly back into the console, go straight into that particular endpoint, and then I can even go as far as isolate that endpoint at a local level to turn off all inbound and outbound network connections except for the SentinelOne agent, so you can conduct your investigation and to minimize risk to the rest of your environment. But the overlying theme here is to be able to do this very, very rapidly. And that's basically it.
Hey Scott, if I could add something to that,
Sure.
I think what's really handy about having that Conceal plugin directly inside the SentinelOne console, it allows us to have more wholesome investigations, right? Because then we could see, is this activity spreading? Is this not quite lateral movement in the normal sense, but say, that'll help you identify if this is a spray attack, or multiple users receiving the same email, or are multiple users receiving different emails but pointing to the same link. And then you could see if those users are being convinced well enough in that email to click on it, because it will be received through the Conceal event logs, right? So that gives us us some further insight to say, what other endpoints are impacted, right? So do we need to just isolate this one endpoint or to do multiple at a time? So that's very helpful.
That's awesome. Wonderful. Well, I mean, I don't know if we need to go if we don't have to. I think that was a pretty good fireside chat, a good demo. If there's any questions at all, feel free to drop them in the chat. We'd be happy to take some Q&A. But Solis is a premier partner of both SentinelOne and Conceal. If you're interested in trying either of us out, I'm sure they'd be more than happy to oblige to that. While we're waiting for questions, big thank you to Scott, Shante, and Craig for your time today. This was a really good discussion. Appreciate it.
Hey Rob, there's a question in the Q&A tab of the webinar.
All right, I will read it out loud, and hopefully one of y'all can answer. With the SentinelOne integration with Conceal, would it be able to detect and learn the website access behavior of users and detect an anomaly that learned user website access behavior? Do you want me to repeat that one more time?
So I think, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I think this goes to what Shante was just describing, really, which is, you can start to see these patterns of users visiting specific URLs, and then looking at that across a broader section of the host community that you're monitoring with SentinelOne.
Yeah, and also we can take this a step further too. So SentinelOne as an EDR also does record all of the DNS requests that are made by every single individual hosts. So if you couple that with some of the alerting that you're getting with Conceal, you can actually craft some EDR queries that can stack and rank and trend based on those alerted URLs. And then now with Purple AI, which is our artificial intelligence assistant for our EDR, you can even write plain language queries into something to the effect of what are the browsers that are most commonly being used to access blocked websites, or have there been any malware incidents that have stemmed from these types of findings by Conceal. And then it'll generate the query, and then you generate tables. You can use that to even create dashboards. So really you're only limited to your imagination as to what type of data you want to look at and how you want to look at it.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, Rich, because we even use the information that we find through our incidents to continue to build our own internal threat intel database that we use to continuously monitor the rest of our customers. Excellent.
Yeah. That network effect. And before we wrap up, I think that was the only question. One thing I think we forgot to hit on, folks, was the content filtering that we now give SentinelOne, where you guys can block certain categories of websites, adult gambling, and all that. So that is now a feature, through Conceal and, in the integration, you'd be able to enjoy. So, with that said, again, big thank you, Scott, Shante, and Craig, everybody that helped set up this webinar. Thank you for your time. Have a wonderful rest of your week.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.